The trolley problem serves as an enduring foundation for understanding the mechanics of human morality. When we are forced to confront the choice between 5 lives and 1, we are immediately pulled into a clash of internal systems. On the surface, the math seems straightforward. The loss of 1 life is objectively a smaller tragedy than the loss of 5. Yet, the visceral reaction to the trolley scenario reveals that our brains do not function like simple calculators. We are wired to feel the weight of agency. When we are the driver, we feel a duty to minimize harm, but the moment the situation shifts to us being an active participant on a bridge, our sense of responsibility changes. This transition from passive observer to active perpetrator is where the human element truly complicates the rational equation. By examining these scenarios, we begin to peel back the layers of our own decision-making processes. We often pride ourselves on being logical, yet our discomfort with pushing a person onto the tracks proves that we hold onto deontological boundaries, rules about what is inherently wrong, even when the outcome suggests otherwise. This tension is not a sign of irrationality, but rather a reflection of the complex social contract we live by. We fear a world where individuals can be sacrificed for the greater good at any moment, because that would destroy the foundation of personal safety and rights that hold society together. Therefore, our hesitation to act in the second scenario is a safeguard for the collective trust we need to function. The utilitarian impulse is to always maximize the net benefit, which seems noble on paper. It aims to reduce suffering in its totality. However, when we apply this cold logic to real-world scenarios, it often strips away the humanity of the individuals involved. If we only saw people as units of utility, as numbers to be added or subtracted, we would lose the capacity for empathy. The argument that it is better for 1 to die so 5 may live ignores the profound moral stain left on the person forced to make that choice. Philosophers have debated this for centuries because there is no perfect answer, only a series of trade-offs that leave us questioning our own moral integrity. In the classroom, we see students struggle with this because they want a clear, absolute answer. They want to be able to say, "This is the right thing to do," and be done with it. But philosophy doesn't offer a clean resolution. It invites us to sit with the discomfort of our contradictions. When we look at the doctor who has to choose between saving 5 patients or 1, the math is the same as the trolley, yet the emotional context is different. We expect doctors to save as many lives as possible, but we recoil at the idea of a surgeon harvesting organs from a healthy visitor. This reveals that our morality is deeply tied to our expectations of roles and duties. The distinction between an accident and a targeted action is crucial. In the trolley car, the situation is already unfolding. We are merely steering a disaster that is already in motion. But when we talk about the organ donor, we are creating a new harm to fix an old one. This nuance is why legal and ethical systems struggle to categorize these events. A judge or a policymaker cannot simply rely on a calculator to dispense justice. They must weigh the intent, the consequences, and the precedent. Each decision we make in these thought experiments serves as a ripple that affects how we view our responsibilities towards strangers and society at large. We must consider why we are so resistant to utilitarianism in the bridge scenario. It is not just about the act of pushing, it is about the violation of autonomy. To use a person as a means to an end, without their consent, strikes at the heart of human dignity. Even if that sacrifice saves 5 lives, it suggests that any individual could be disposable if the math favors it. A society built on such principles would be terrifying. We need the protection of rights to feel secure in our own existence. Thus, even if a choice seems logical in terms of survival, it may be wrong in terms of the kind of civilization we want to inhabit. The dialogue between the students in the lecture hall mirrors the broader cultural discourse on these topics. We see people who are quick to jump to the utilitarian conclusion, and others who are anchored by their moral intuitions. Both sides are necessary. Without the utilitarians, we might be paralyzed by inaction in the face of inevitable tragedy. Without the categorical thinkers, we might lose our humanity in the name of efficiency. The brilliance of the trolley problem is that it forces both groups to defend their positions, leading to a deeper understanding of the values they prioritize. It moves us away from blind belief and toward conscious moral reasoning. As we move through these scenarios, we must ask ourselves if we are being consistent. If we say we value 5 lives over one, are we prepared to apply that standard universally? Most people are not. We create exceptions for our friends, our family, and our own comfort. This inconsistency is a human trait, not necessarily a failure. It reminds us that morality is not a vacuum. It is deeply embedded in our relationships and our subjective experiences. We are not robots processing data. We are feeling beings who carry the weight of our choices long after the trolley has passed. The intellectual risk of this exercise is becoming detached from reality. When we sit in a theater and argue about fat men on bridges and transplant surgeons, it can feel like a game. But the professor warns us that this is not a game. It is an exploration of what we already know to be true, but often choose not to confront. By making the familiar strange, we start to see the hidden assumptions that guide our daily lives. We see that every choice, no matter how small, is a reflection of our underlying ethical framework, even if we are not consciously aware of it. Many people use skepticism as a shield to avoid this work. They claim that because there is no consensus, there is no point in trying to figure out the truth. They argue that everyone has their own opinion. But this is a retreat from the responsibility of living an examined life. If we abandon the search for what is right, we are essentially letting our circumstances dictate our values. The restlessness of reason, which Kant describes, is a vital human quality. It is what keeps us from settling for easy answers and keeps us searching for a more just way to live. The beauty of these lectures is not that they provide a manual for morality, but that they force us to build our own. We are tasked with synthesizing the lessons of the past with the challenges of the present. When we argue about affirmative action or free speech, we are really arguing about the same things we debated in the trolley problem. The conflict between the individual and the collective, the definition of fairness, and the limits of our obligations to one another. Each debate is a new version of the trolley car, and we are still the ones holding the switch. It is easy to look at the history of philosophy as a dusty collection of ideas, but it is actually a living, breathing guide to human conduct. Thinkers like Aristotle and John Stuart Mill weren't just writing for their contemporaries. They were trying to solve the problem of how to live together. Their ideas have survived because they address the fundamental tensions that haven't changed in thousands of years. We still have the same conflicts between our desires and our duties, between our selfishness and our altruism. Bringing these ideas into the 21st century allows us to see our own struggles through the lens of those who came before us. One might argue that in an era of technology and rapid change, these old questions are obsolete. But as we face new ethical dilemmas, such as the programming of autonomous vehicles or the allocation of medical resources during a pandemic, we find ourselves using the exact same logic. A self-driving car will eventually face a real-world version of the trolley problem. The software engineers behind these machines are essentially acting as the philosophers of the digital age. They are hard-coding moral values into the world, and they need to understand the consequences of the principles they choose. The role of the citizen in a democracy is also tested by these dilemmas. We are constantly asked to vote on policies that affect the lives of others. When we support a budget that funds some programs but not others, we are making a choice about whose needs are prioritized. This is why philosophy is not just a personal pursuit but a political one. We are shaping the world for our neighbors, and if we do so without reflection, we are being irresponsible. We owe it to one another to understand the ethical trade-offs inherent in our public decisions. There is a sense of inevitability in these scenarios that can be unsettling. We often feel as if the trolley is moving toward us, and we have no choice but to react. This reflects the reality of life's pressures. Sometimes there is no good outcome, only a choice between two bad ones. In these moments, we realize that the goal is not to be perfect, but to be intentional. We must accept that we will have to live with the results of our choices, and that the only way to do so with integrity is to have considered the principles beforehand. The idea of losing our innocence through self-knowledge is perhaps the most profound takeaway from the lecture. We grow up believing that we are good people who do the right things. But when we see that our goodness is inconsistent or fragile, it challenges our self-perception. This is painful, but it is also necessary for growth. We cannot become better people if we refuse to acknowledge our own contradictions. The struggle to reconcile what we think with what we would actually do is the crucible in which our character is formed. Many students feel empowered by the realization that they can change their minds. They come in with a rigid set of rules, but as they debate, they find that their logic doesn't always hold up. This flexibility is a strength, not a weakness. It demonstrates a willingness to learn and adapt. The ability to argue a point, listen to a counterargument, and then refine one's own position is the hallmark of a healthy intellect. This is the very essence of the restlessness of reason that the professor invites us to cultivate. Ultimately, the trolley problem is a mirror. It doesn't show us what we should do as much as it shows us who we are. Our reactions reveal what we value most. Is it the sanctity of life, the purity of our own hands, or the outcome for the greatest number? By understanding these values, we can move forward with more clarity. We might never find a consensus, but we can certainly find a deeper sense of purpose in our arguments. We learn to appreciate the complexity of the human condition and to treat those who disagree with us with more empathy. We must also guard against the temptation to dismiss the minority. Just because a majority agrees on a certain action does not make it objectively right. History is full of examples where the logical majority opinion led to catastrophic outcomes. The minority, the ones who insist on sticking to categorical rules, often act as the conscience of the group. They force the majority to account for the values they might be sacrificing. This dynamic is essential for any healthy society. We need the tension between the pushers and the holders. In closing this section, consider the responsibility that comes with this knowledge. Once you have realized that your moral intuitions can be challenged and shifted, you can never go back to being a passive thinker. You are now part of a long lineage of people who have grappled with these impossible questions. The story of the course is about you because it is about the choices you will inevitably face. The trolley is coming, and you are already on the tracks, whether you are the driver, the onlooker, or the passenger. Part 2. The evolution of moral reasoning. As we progress through the complexities of these dilemmas, we see that moral reasoning is not static. It shifts as the context changes, demonstrating the fluidity of our internal moral compass. We started with the trolley driver, moved to the onlooker on the bridge, and then to the doctor, and in every instance, our principles were tested by the weight of the circumstances. This constant reevaluation is where true wisdom begins to take shape. It is a process of refinement, where each new piece of information or new perspective forces us to sharpen our understanding of justice and duty. We are not just repeating arguments, we are building an architecture of thought that can support the heavy burdens of decision-making. One of the most fascinating aspects of this evolution is the realization of our own bias. We often think our moral judgments are based on universal truths, but they are frequently shaped by our emotional distance from the act. It is much easier to divert a trolley than to physically shove a person to their death. This is the yuck factor, or the emotional revulsion that occurs when we consider direct violence. While utilitarians argue that the emotional response should be ignored in favor of the net outcome, a humanistic view recognizes that our emotions are part of who we are. They are not merely obstacles to reason. They are signals that tell us something significant about the nature of our actions. Consider the role of consent in these scenarios. In the transplant surgeon case, the healthy guy has come in for a checkup, expecting safety and medical care. The doctor's urge to kill him for his organs is a profound betrayal of the social contract. Even if 5 people are saved, the act breaks the trust that every patient has in the medical profession. If such an act were permissible, people would be afraid to enter hospitals. This is a classic example of why consequentialism, when taken to its extreme, can become self-defeating. By ignoring the broader impact of an action, we might save 5 lives today but destroy the safety of the world tomorrow. The shift toward categorical thinking, as championed by Immanuel Kant, provides a necessary counterbalance to the utilitarian drive. Kant argued that there are certain actions, like murder or lying, that are categorically wrong, regardless of the consequences. This provides a sense of stability and predictability. It tells us that there are lines we cannot cross, and that human beings are never just means to an end. For those who feel uneasy about the cold calculus of the trolley problem, Kantian ethics offers a home. It validates the intuition that there is something sacred about the individual that cannot be traded away. However, Kantian ethics also has its own dilemmas. What happens when following a categorical rule leads to a disaster? If we have a rule against lying, but lying would save an innocent life from an attacker, is it still wrong to lie? This is the conflict that drives much of modern political and ethical debate. We want to be people of principle, but we also want to be people who prevent suffering. The struggle to find the middle ground between these two poles is where the most difficult and rewarding work of the philosopher lies. It is not about choosing one or the other, but about learning how to navigate the tension between them. The transition from the classroom to the real world is where these theories are truly tested. Take the example of military conscription. We are essentially deciding that the lives of some are less important than the survival of the state. This is a massive, real-world trolley problem. We are asking a small group of people to risk or lose their lives so that the rest of the population can continue to live in peace. How do we justify this? Is it purely utilitarian, based on the survival of the many, or is there a categorical duty to defend one's home? These are the questions that keep political philosophers up at night. We must also consider the role of institutional power. When a government or a large corporation makes a decision that will harm a few to help the many, they often hide behind the language of utility. They call it the greater good or a necessary sacrifice. This is why we must be skeptical. We have to look at who is doing the sacrificing and who is doing the benefiting. Usually, it is the vulnerable who are on the tracks, while the powerful are in the position of the driver. Understanding this power dynamic is crucial for any honest analysis of morality. The idea of the restlessness of reason is a call to action against intellectual complacency. When we say, "I'm just following the rules," we are often evading the moral weight of our choices. We are letting the system do the thinking for us. But the system is made of people, and those people make choices. By encouraging students to question everything, the professor is trying to break them out of this cycle of passive obedience. He wants them to realize that they are the architects of their own moral universe. This is a daunting prospect, but it is the only way to be truly free. As we analyze these dilemmas, we see that language matters. How we frame a problem changes the way we solve it. If we call it collateral damage instead of killing innocent people, we soften the blow to our conscience. This is a linguistic trick that allows us to ignore the humanity of our victims. Philosophers are trained to see through this terminology. They strip away the euphemisms to look at the reality of the action. This is one of the most valuable skills one can learn in a philosophy course, the ability to see things as they really are, without the fog of propaganda. The influence of Jeremy Bentham and the utilitarian movement cannot be overstated. He provided a clear, actionable way to think about morality that has influenced everything from economics to public health. The idea of the greatest happiness for the greatest number is simple, elegant, and powerful. But the critiques of his work, such as those by John Stuart Mill or the later deontologists, are just as important. They remind us that happiness is not the only value, and that there are other things like justice, liberty, and rights that matter just as much. Throughout the course, we see that the debate between utilitarianism and categorical ethics is never truly settled. It continues because both sides offer something we value. We want to be happy, and we want the world to be a better, less painful place. But we also want to be respected, and we want our rights to be protected. These two desires often clash, and there is no simple algorithm to resolve them. The best we can do is to engage in the debate and keep the conversation going. The irony of the skeptic is that they are also making a moral choice. By deciding not to engage with the difficult questions, they are essentially saying that morality is not worth the effort. But as the professor points out, that is a position that can never be a dwelling place. We have to live our lives, and in doing so, we are forced to act. Every time we act, we are making a moral statement. Even the refusal to choose is a choice. We are all philosophers, whether we want to be or not. Consider the implications of this for our personal lives. How do we treat the people we interact with every day? Are we using them as means to an end, or are we treating them with the dignity they deserve? The same principles we use for the trolley car apply to our relationships. If we only value our friends for what they can do for us, we are acting like utilitarians in the worst possible way. But if we value them for who they are, we are living according to categorical respect. These are the small, daily applications of the ideas we debate in the lecture hall. The psychological dimension of these dilemmas is also a key area of study. Why do we feel differently when we have to perform the action ourselves? Recent advances in neuroscience have shown that different parts of our brain light up when we think about the trolley car versus the bridge scenario. The logical, utilitarian side of the brain is active in both, but the emotional, empathetic side is much more active when we are forced to push someone. This confirms that our moral intuition is a blend of both ancient, instinctual responses and modern, logical reasoning. This doesn't invalidate our moral judgments, it explains them. It shows that we are designed to be both cooperative and protective. We are social animals who need to work together to survive, but we also have strong impulses to protect the individuals in our immediate circle. This is not a contradiction. It is a feature of our species. The challenge is to learn how to manage these competing impulses in a world that is much larger and more complex than the one we evolved in. We should also reflect on the role of the audience in the lecture. The fact that the students laugh when the professor introduces the fat man or the organ transplant is a natural release of tension. The topics are heavy and uncomfortable. Humor is a way of coping with the existential dread of these scenarios. It shows that even in the face of death and ethical catastrophe, the human spirit looks for a way to breathe. This doesn't mean we are taking the subject lightly. It means we are confronting it with the full range of human expression. The structure of the course itself, which moves from hypotheticals to real-world issues, is a brilliant pedagogical tool. By starting with the abstract, we can clarify our principles without the baggage of real-world politics. Then, when we bring in issues like affirmative action or military service, we have a framework to apply. This makes the discussions much more sophisticated than they would be otherwise. We aren't just shouting opinions at each other. We are testing our principles against the realities of policy and law. It is important to remember that the professor's role is not to give the right answer, but to guide the students to theirs. He is a facilitator of thought. He pushes, he challenges, and he questions, but he leaves the conclusions to the class. This is the hallmark of great education. He is creating a space where it is safe to be wrong, to be confused, and to be challenged. In this environment, the students become the true teachers as they challenge each other and refine their collective understanding. The risks mentioned, personal and political, are real. When you start questioning the foundations of your society, you might find that you no longer fit in. You might see the petty quibbles of active life differently. But this is the price of awareness. You can't unsee the problems once you've identified them. You have to decide whether to continue the path of investigation or to retreat into comfortable ignorance. As the professor suggests, there is no going back once the familiar has turned strain. In finishing this section, let us reflect on the enduring nature of these questions. We are all, in our own way, standing on the bridge. We are all facing the trolley. Whether we turn the switch or choose to refrain, we are making a claim about what it means to be a person in the world. And as we continue this journey, the most important thing we can carry with us is the restlessness of reason, the refusal to stop questioning, and the courage to face the answers we find. Part 3. The Call to Civic Responsibility. As we arrive at the third part of our exploration, the focus shifts from the theoretical to the deeply civic. Having navigated the treacherous waters of the trolley problem and the organ donor, we must now apply these lessons to the way we function as members of a society. The restlessness of reason is not meant to remain trapped in a lecture hall. It is intended to be the fuel that drives our participation in the public sphere. When we engage with political and legal controversies, we aren't just debating policies, we are debating the very soul of our civilization. This is why the study of philosophy is an essential component of responsible citizenship, even if it feels unsettling at times. The danger of political philosophy, as Calicles warned, is that it can alienate us from the practicalities of governance. It is easy to sit in an ivory tower and argue about justice. It is much harder to implement justice in a messy, imperfect world where resources are scarce and interests are in conflict. However, the alternative, to abandon argument and simply accept the status quo, is even more dangerous. If we don't apply philosophical rigor to our public affairs, we are left with nothing but the exercise of raw power. We need the distancing effect of philosophy to see that the way things are is not the same as the way things should be. Consider the topic of equality. Many people agree that we should have an equal society, but they disagree profoundly on what that means. Does equality mean equal opportunity, or does it mean equal outcomes? This is a fundamental philosophical question that shapes everything from taxation to education policy. If we are utilitarians, we might favor policies that maximize the collective well-being, even if it creates significant inequality. If we are Kantians, we might focus on the duty to protect the rights of the individual, even if it slows down progress. These are the same debates we had with the trolley car, only now they are happening in the halls of government. Free speech is another area where these principles collide. We cherish the idea of free expression, but what happens when that speech causes harm to others? If we believe that speech is an absolute right, we are taking a categorical stance. If we believe that speech should be regulated to prevent social damage, we are taking a utilitarian stance. There is no simple solution that satisfies everyone. The goal of the philosopher-citizen is to understand the trade-offs. We must be willing to defend our principles while acknowledging the costs they impose on the society we share. The same applies to the difficult topic of military service and war. When a nation decides to intervene in a conflict, it is a massive moral decision. We are deciding that the values we represent are worth the lives of our soldiers and the people of the other nation. This is a burden that every citizen shares, regardless of whether they have ever served. If we don't engage with the ethics of our foreign policy, we are complicit in whatever outcomes that policy produces. Philosophy helps us to confront this reality and to demand more from our leaders. The skepticism that the professor warns about is particularly prevalent in politics today. Many people believe that political discourse is a waste of time because no one ever changes their mind. This cynicism is a form of surrender. It suggests that our capacity for reason is limited and that we are destined to be divided into camps. But if we believe that, we have already lost. The point of public discourse is not always to change someone else's mind. Sometimes it is to clarify our own, to identify where we agree, and to find a way to live together despite our differences. The personal risks of philosophy are also amplified in the political realm. When you start to question the assumptions of your own political party or your own community, you can face intense pressure. You might be accused of being disloyal or impractical, but this is the test of your integrity. A person who is capable of questioning their own side is the only kind of person who can truly hold power accountable. It takes courage to stand up and say, "I see the logic, but I think the moral cost is too high." This is the kind of voice we need in our democracy. As we look at the history of these ideas, we see that they have been used both to justify oppression and to drive liberation. The concept of rights, for example, was used to challenge the divine right of kings and to establish the principle that all people are created equal. It was a radical idea that changed the course of history. Today, we use the same concept to fight for the rights of marginalized groups. The power of these ideas lies in their ability to adapt and to inspire. They are not static artifacts, they are tools for change. The role of the educator is to show us how to use these tools. By teaching us to analyze the arguments, identify the fallacies, and understand the core principles, the professor is giving us the skills to be effective participants in the world. He is not teaching us what to think, but how to think. He is training us to see the trolley car in the policy, to recognize the fat man in the budgetary choice, and to identify the surgeon in the legislation. This is an empowerment that no politician can take away. One of the most important lessons is that we are all fallible. None of us has a monopoly on the truth. Even the greatest philosophers have been proven wrong on some points. This should lead to a sense of humility. When we engage in political debate, we should do so with the recognition that we might be wrong. This doesn't mean we should be weak in our convictions, but that we should be open to the possibility of learning. This is the difference between a dogmatic ideologue and a true citizen. We must also cultivate the habit of seeing the human being in the other. In the heat of political argument, it is easy to caricature the people we disagree with. We see them as the obstacle to our progress, rather than as fellow citizens with their own set of values and fears. But as the trolley problem teaches us, we are all part of the same human story. We are all dealing with the same pressures and the same uncertainties. By remembering this, we can lower the temperature of our debates and find common ground. The restlessness of reason is also a source of hope. It suggests that as long as we continue to think and argue, there is the potential for improvement. We haven't reached the end of history. We are still learning, still growing, and still struggling to create a more just society. This is an ongoing project that requires the participation of every generation. We are the inheritors of the past, but we are also the creators of the future. The choices we make today will set the stage for the moral dilemmas of tomorrow. Think about the importance of empathy in this process. Utilitarianism can be cold, and categorical ethics can be rigid, but empathy bridges the gap. It allows us to feel the weight of our decisions and to understand the impact on those we affect. Empathy is not a substitute for reason, but it is an essential companion to it. A person who reasons without empathy is a menace. A person who empathizes without reason is a chaotic mess. We need the balance of both to act justly in the world. As we conclude this series, I want you to consider the risk of the course one last time. You are now different than you were when you started. You have looked at the trolley car and you have realized that there is no perfect way to act. You have felt the weight of the trolley, the burden of the decision, and the necessity of the sacrifice. You are now a more self-aware person. You understand that your own morality is a work in progress, and that this is a good thing. This means that you are now better equipped to handle the challenges of the world. You don't have all the answers, but you know which questions to ask. You know how to look beneath the surface of the news, how to identify the principles at play, and how to hold your own leaders accountable. You are no longer a passive observer of history. You are an active participant in it. And that is the most important role you will ever play. The lecture hall may have been a simulation, but the life you lead is real. The choices you make will have consequences that ripple through the lives of others. This is the story the professor mentioned. It is a story about how we reconcile our competing values and how we build a life of purpose. It is a story that you are writing every single day. Make sure it is a story that you are proud to tell. I hope that this analysis has helped you to see the value in these questions. They are not just for the academic elite. They are for everyone who lives, works, and votes. They are the essential questions of the human experience. If you can keep the restlessness of reason alive, you will have the tools you need to face whatever trolley comes your way. As you reflect on this, remember that the most important thing is to keep the conversation going. Talk to your friends, your family, and your colleagues. Challenge them, listen to them, and let them challenge you. This is how we build a stronger community. This is how we cultivate the wisdom to make the hard choices when the time comes. Thank you for engaging with these ideas. By taking the time to think about the trolley problem, you have taken a step toward a more thoughtful, engaged, and responsible life. This is the work of a lifetime, and it is the most rewarding work we can do. Keep your reasoning restless, keep your empathy active, and never lose your sense of wonder about the world. The journey of moral discovery is never truly finished. We are always learning, always growing, and always searching for a better way to live. This is what makes us human. And as we continue this journey together, let us hold on to the knowledge that no matter how difficult the choice, we have the ability to act with intention, integrity, and grace. That is the true goal of moral philosophy, and it is the greatest gift we can give to each other.